first speaker, Miss Jess Lewis. So let me tell you all a little bit about Jess before we get her up here. Jess is really exciting because, number one, I've worked with her. So I've met her and worked with her and spent several hours with her. And I can tell you that she is genius in her work. She is a vision shaper. She's worked with award-winning entrepreneurs with $1 billion in exits. She has with New York Times bestselling authors, global giants, social marketers from Katy Perry, Olympians, startups, solopreneurs. She has a 22-year career. She helped Meta drive their 2021 rebrand, their first Olympic sponsorship, and the 2020 voter drive that registered 4.4 million voters. She launched Facebook's Watch and the Netflix originals globally, and she spearheaded rebranding for international arts organizations that achieved 600% membership growth and contributed to 50% of their revenue. She's built and monetized monetization engines for new tech. She's partnered with nearly every major media outlet and co-produced original music with Whoopi Goldberg, her true career highlight. Welcome to the stage, Jess Lewis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that. It just makes me feel really old.
Oh,
It does. Like, wow, that's a lot of years of stuff. Really, really great to meet everyone. I'm Jess. So I see some of you on video, some not. I am going to be sharing some slides, so hopefully you can see me. And please feel free to, call out as we go along. But today, we're going to be kicking off with talking about brand and what that has to do with scaling. And most people, I find, let me share my screen here. Can everybody see this? Put it in present mode for you. Awesome. So when we think about this idea of scaling, which is what everybody wants to do, it doesn't matter what phase of growth you're in, whether you're just a solopreneur and you have an idea and you have done nothing else, or you are running a small, medium-sized business, or even if you're in a corporation, if you're in business, even as a nonprofit, everybody is looking to scale. Sometimes when you use the word brand in association with that, it can kind of feel like a little bit of an oxymoron. And what scaling could possibly have to do with brand. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of insight as to how actually scaling starts with brand, and in fact turns out to be the silent referee of almost every business decision you make. So before we start though, just want to ask, and feel free to call out, you can take yourselves off of mute. Does everyone know what a brand is? I know it's a word we use a lot, but what is a brand? Any ideas? You're gonna make me call on you and call you guys out. Okay, so I'll just talk. I'll just answer for you since it's we're warming up. But a brand is very simply who and what you are. Who and what you are, and it's confusing because if you were to Google the word brand right now, and just put into Google what is a brand, you would probably get about 13 different answers. And it's really difficult to build something that you can't really define or that hasn't been sort of universally defined, right? But a brand is very simply who and what you are. So the next question is, if you don't want to speak out because it's still morning, you haven't fully warmed up yet, what function does it serve in a company? Say your sales force, the function of a sales force is to bring in money, right? An engineering team, its function is to build code. What is the purpose of a brand? Like, why do we even need it? Has anybody ever thought about that? We know it's important, but like, do we really know why? Any ideas? Feel free to call out if you have any inspirations. If not, no one put you on the spot.
is it like your I am statement for your company?
It is in part, yeah. Any other thoughts? I'll just ask you this because I can see you even though you're not talking. If you have an idea about what the function of a brand is in the company, just raise your hand. And if you have no idea, don't raise your hand. Okay. A brand is actually your center of gravity that drives every business decision that you make. So think about the solar system, right? Everything in the solar system is organized and ordered by its gravitational pull to the sun. Earth does the same thing every day, knows exactly what to do because of its gravitational pull to the sun, relative to Saturn, relative to Mars, relative to every single particle short of an Armageddon, knows exactly what to do in relationship to each other because of its gravitational pull to the sun. That's what brand clarity does for your business. It's no different than the blueprint of the house or that instruction manual that informs how you build an IKEA dresser. No one would dare put together or attempt to put together a piece of IKEA furniture without looking at that instruction manual. And yet that is what most people do in their business is they have an idea, they dive right in. I need money. I need marketing. I need social media. Yes, yes, and yes. But what blueprint are you working off of? And what's really interesting is so as Helmut mentioned, I come from a big corporate background and work for some companies you probably have heard of. And as a result of having that luxury, I've worked with a lot of very expensive agencies. And I always assumed that the work of building brand architecture, which is what is going to be the foundation of your brand, what is going to drive every business decision you make and be that blueprint for your business, was work that everybody just did because it was work I always just did. And it was only when I got out of big corporate that I realized that, especially for people who are solopreneurs, startup, teams, and everybody else that was really kind of, out there running smaller operations, doesn't even know this work exists. And it really surprised me when I first started because I was like, why? How could you possibly build a house without the blueprint? But yet that's what everybody is trying to do. So is everybody with me so far? Is this making sense? What a brand is and the function that it's serving in your business? So the question then next becomes, okay, if I know a brand is not only important, but is actually the silent referee that is driving everything that I do from this point forward, it's probably pretty important that you identify what type of brand you want to build. And there are actually two types of brands, as I see it, that you can build that will inform your entire business operating model. So remember, we defined a brand as who and what you are. You can either be a who brand or a what brand. What is the difference? Ooh, sorry. Here we go. What brands versus who brands? So I would say, with no actual data, just sort of observing and being in the space for a long time, 99.9% of brands are what we can identify as what brands. What brands are brands that emphasize in their market positioning, first and foremost, what you do. I sell hair dryers. We provide coaching services. We run an animal shelter. What it is that you do. These brands try to convince people to buy or use something, right? That makes sense. I sell hair dryers. I would like for you to buy it. Please click here. Then, once you have your customers, you spend an enormous amount in customer loyalty and retention once they're in the door. How are you going to keep them? With the North Star being profit and revenue. This probably looks very familiar, this model, and makes a lot of sense. And for everybody here on this call who is building a business, this might be exactly what you are endeavoring to do, whether you were conscious of putting it into this kind of a framework or not. You can be massively successful as a what brand. Meta is a what brand. Amazon is a what brand. I'm sure everybody on this call can tell me what Meta does. Nobody could tell me who Meta is, though. And I know that no one can tell me who Meta is because having worked there and had been pushing for this work for a long time, they made the decision not to actually invest in it and to really stick strictly into product marketing. Same with Amazon, right? Well, what's the problem, though, with this model? Is that you are only as valuable as insofar you are serving the needs of the customers better than anybody else right now. I sell better hair dryers than anybody else right now. I'm successful. But what is the opposite of right now? Forever. When you build a what brand, what you are signing up to do is be in constant competition with everybody else. Because remember, you're only as successful as you're serving the needs better than anybody else and have better marketing and have better than anybody else right now for right now. But what we also know to be true is that progress is going to happen no matter what. right? The train will always become the plane. And so eBay, MySpace, Yahoo, I'm sure we all remember those brands in their day, in their moment, they were the biggest things going. Incredible revenue engines, seemed like they were completely unstoppable. But then comes along Google, MySpace, and Facebook, and almost proverbially speaking, overnight, they became almost prehistoric. And they're still around and they're still doing well, but they're not what they used to be. And their best days, I think we all agree, are not ahead. They are behind. So the antidote to building a what brand is building a who brand. What is a who brand? A who brand is a brand that in its market positioning and in the way that it emphasizes how you show up in the world, emphasizes who you are. Now, of course, if you know who someone is or who an entity is, you also probably know what they do. They are trying to inspire people to believe in something. If you believe in something, you're probably also buying or using it. But it's a very, very different approach, very different messaging, very different tactics, a very different timeline, right? Who brands are looking to build movements versus what brands, which are heavily invested in the more transactional customer loyalty and retention, which is very ephemeral and really doesn't give you the kind of offensive control that you would be looking for in building a brand. And the North Star for a Who brand is impact and legacy. Now, if you get to a place where you're making impact and legacy, you probably also have an enormous amount of money as well. So classic Who brand case, Nike, probably the first one that came to mind for anybody who is, kind of trying to pinpoint what a Who brand might be. Apple would be another, kind of two gold standard brands. Red Bull is another one that, we probably know. By the time we're done watching Nike ads, for the most part, we kind of forget that they're selling us shoes. We are so invested in their human interest stories and what they're really selling us, which is something so much bigger than their product. It's the belief in ourselves, the belief that we too can just do anything if we just do it, right? Apple, they are selling us the belief that if we think different, we too can change the world. Now, yes, we need their products in order to do that. Their products become the conduit to that, but that's not really what they're selling. They're selling us the belief that we too can change the world with our creativity. If we do that, Who brands are forever, or are better set up to be forever insofar as there's any quote guarantee that you can do that. And why is that? Is because it's so much more difficult to abandon a brand that you know and love than one you just transact with. One you just transact with, like a Yahoo, like an eBay, awesome, great, until something better comes along that's going to serve your needs better. And then off you go, right? Is this making sense to everyone? Great. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in the real world. This is a former billboard of the Los Angeles Clippers. Not sure if anybody here is also from LA, lives in LA, but if you don't, a little bit of a background on the Clippers. They are sort of the team we don't really know why we have. We have the Lakers. We don't know why we need two teams. And in the hierarchy of basketball in Los Angeles, it was like the Lakers, college ball, Venice pickup games, lots of other basketball, and then like the Clippers. Like it was truly the team that like we just didn't know why we needed it. This is one of their old campaign ads that ran for many, many, many years. Their tagline, "Together we will." Looking here, what do we see? We see a bunch of players, a bunch of basketball players in very generic sort of like roar, like I will beat you, very macho men. If they weren't wearing basketball jerseys, they could be from any sports team, and they're trying to sell us tickets, right? This worked when they had three-star players that most people wanted to go and see. They were selling what it is that they do. They play basketball and they won sometimes mostly because they had these three-star players. In 2017, all three of their star players got either traded or left within 3 months. And the marketing team freaked out because they didn't know what to sell. They had no what to sell anymore. Overnight, they lost nearly all of their season ticket holders, had no idea what to do. They were forced to ask themselves the question, who is a Clipper? if we can't sell basketball because no one's buying it, who are we? And what can we do with that? This was what they came up with. A Clipper is not the red carpet. It's not Rodeo Drive. It's not fancy Beverly Hills with Ferraris. The Clipper represents the other 10 million people in LA that never see Beverly Hills, that aren't on the red carpet, that don't have that brand that the Lakers had of being that razzle dazzle, flashy brand with all of the endorsements and all the, kind of fancy gold and purples. They were the people that hustled. They were the underdogs. And so instead, they completely changed over this campaign into from Together We Will to LA Our Way. All of a sudden, you would see billboards plastered all over the city everywhere, driven over given, squad over self, all of these tropes and mantras that really sold something so much bigger than basketball. They were selling teamwork. They were selling hustle. They were selling grind. They were selling grit over glam. They were selling all of these universal human truths that so many Los Angeles residents could really relate to. What wound up happening because of this campaign, they wound up getting all of their season ticket holders back. They also wound up making it to the playoffs when they had no star players whatsoever. And this was in the era of the Warriors three-peat back in like 2018, I think, 2019. And wound up taking the Warriors to game 7 of the playoffs, which no other team had done. And it was largely driven by this new motivation that this team had around really leaning into who they are versus just what they do, because that's ephemeral. That can change drop of a hat, right? And had obvious monetary consequences. So if you're sitting there going like, this is awesome, awesome campaign, brilliant, but it's the Clippers, it's the NBA. They probably had tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. And like all the fancy agencies, that is not me. You would be correct. So I want to show you an example of a campaign that I did that represents the same principles. My budget for this, I used to be a theater producer once upon a time, many, many years ago, as Helmut mentioned. And I was working on this show when I lived in Australia and was working at the Arts Center there. My budget for this campaign, the entire marketing campaign, including creative development and everything, was $9,000. It was this show called The Rap Guide to Evolution. And this really, really brilliant artist had figured out, kind of like in a Hamilton style, where Lin-Manuel Miranda sort of figured out how to wrap the entirety of American history around the Revolutionary era. He had a show that wrapped the entire theory of Darwin's evolution. And it was so brilliant. And the target audience was teenagers. Don't know if any of you have any teenagers, but getting teenagers to the theater is not easy. And that was my task. And so I put out the art that looked just like this. This was the key art for the campaign, or for the show rather. And it had won all of these accolades in Edinburgh, the Fringe, the New York Times was loving it. It had stars all over the place. And it was about 2 weeks or so from opening, and we were 40% sold. And I was freaking out, clearly not being responsive. I was selling what the show was. No one cared. No one cared because this is not how teenagers communicate, right? And so I paused and I said, okay, who is this show? If this show were a human entity, who is it? And so all I did was I took a monkey to man evolution image and I just put out a social post, organic, and it said, don't sleep with mean people. It went completely viral. We not only sold out the show, we wound up achieving 143% of revenue targets and extended the season. And this was all within 2 weeks before we opened, just because I switched the campaign from being a what campaign to a who campaign. Does this make sense? Everybody seeing how this is tracking now? So very accessible to do. It's just a flip in your thinking. And as you can also see in these two examples, marketing at its core is really nothing more than a negotiation, right? Like, what's a negotiation? It's getting somebody to do something that you want them to do that they may or may not want to do. That's a negotiation. You want to get your kids in bed at 8 o'clock. They may or may not want to do that, and you've got to get them to do that. You don't want your dog to chew your shoe. Your dog may or may not want to do that. You have to get your dog not to do that. That's what marketing is. So if marketing is a negotiation, that means you can either be on the defense or you can be on the offense. Of course, you want to be in the offensive position, because what does that mean? That means that you're having your conversation with people no matter what. Whether they're on your train or they're off your train, it's almost irrelevant, because you're flipping your approach from trying to guess and check what other people might respond to, what they need, what the market is needing at this particular moment, to I have my center of gravity. I have my purpose. I need to say what I need to say because it's a direct extension, and my positioning is a direct extension of what I'm trying to do. Instead of being pushed by pain, I'm being pulled by vision, and I'm going. And so what does that mean? You can be a lot more creative. You don't have to you don't have to tell as much. You can show a lot more. And that's what people respond to. You can be a lot more fearless in selling something that's bigger than your product, and not just trusting, but knowing that that is the thing that is going to get people co-signed onto your company and to what you're doing. So is everybody tracking so far? It's making sense? So how do you do this? It sounds great. I'm sure everybody's probably sitting there going like, yeah, wow, I want to build a Who brand. That sounds better. How do you do it? We think about a road trip. Everything I believe in life can be explained best through a metaphor. What happens when you decide that you want to plan to go on a road trip? First thing you do, pick a destination. Where are we going? Are we going to Canada? Or are we going to Mexico? What would happen next? Well, what kind of trip is it? Right? Are we going, if we're going to Canada, are we going skiing in the winter in an RV with all the friends? Or is it a solo trip in the summer with the dog where you want to find yourself a little bit? What kind of trip is it? Right? That is distinctly for you, that's bespoke to wherever you are right now. Then you probably need to put it into the GPS, which means you need like a coordinate. If Canada is very large, where's that Airbnb? I need an address, right? Then who's coming on the journey? And then to-dos. What's the fun stop? What are the fun stops along the way? What's the itinerary, right? This probably tracks for a lot of people. How does that translate into building a brand? Where are you going? Vision and your mission. Critically important. Because if you articulate it wrong, or you don't actually really know what a vision is, or even what the difference between a vision and a mission is, you might intend to go to Canada and your car is pointed directly to New Jersey. And as far as the world is concerned, you're going to New Jersey. And then a whole litany of problems will occur in your business. Can't find product market fit, your ROI is stalled, or maybe doesn't even exist. Your marketing team is not able to deliver, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll be diagnosing symptoms, not the problem. Is that you actually are building a company to the left when you intend to go north. What kind of trip is it? This is going to be your messaging and positioning. This is what's going to make you, you versus category generic. If I'm selling hair dryers and everybody else on this call is selling hair dryers, there's room in the market for all the hair dryers, right? But what's going to make that work for everyone is when you are positioning yourself and have that killer messaging that is so distinct and unique to you. In the same way that we could all be going to Canada, but we might have completely different trips that are bespoke for us, and we'll all get there just fine and have the best time. We don't all have to take the same trip. And we see this a lot with different companies, you know, especially newer companies that are launching, is it's very generic messaging. That's, you know, I'm a real estate developer and I have a new development company and I build sustainable homes at the best quality and give you the best service. That doesn't help me know whether or not I should choose to work with you versus the 28 other development companies that are all within a 15-minute drive of my house, right? How are we getting there? What are we putting into the GPS? That's going to be your goals and your roadmap, right? So when we think about your vision and your mission, that's going to be, we're going to Canada. But when we think about, okay, but where are we going in Canada? We go to Banff, or we going to Toronto? And like, what's the street address that I'm going to? That's so hypercritical to identify. And believe it or not, I've worked with over 60 brands in the last 15 months. Not a single person has actually had that answer for me. And it takes sometimes up to 2 hours to really kind of work through that. And, you know, people will come because they're stuck, or they'll come because they want to build something great, or because they want to grow. And I'm like, awesome. So let's just say we unstuck everything, right? And you're growing. To what end? Where are we going? And it's like, oh, I don't know. I never thought about it. You probably won't get there, right? So then who's coming? Audience target. That's going to be your audience strategy. And then the to-dos, the fun stops along the way, those are your jobs to be done. Those are, once you know where you're going, you've got your vision and your mission, you know how to talk about it and have your narrative strategy, you have your very specific goaling structure to know exactly what at a macro level you need to do and milestones to hit in order to get to where you want to go. You know the audience target that you need to hit. You're sitting at your desk at 9 a.m. Where do you start, right? What do you do? Task by task by task. You complete this and you complete this correctly. This is your brand architecture. This is your brand blueprint. And then you get to watch how much easier everything gets. So I'm going to show you now what happens if you get it wrong. So this was a company that I work with, through which actually I met Helmut, which is a coaching company for entrepreneurs that's led by Ryan Blair. He's a very well-to-do entrepreneur who had a $800 million exit in 2013 and wrote a #1 New York Times bestseller. And he was named Entrepreneur of the Year and has an enormous amount of success. And now he's building this new company, which is coaching other entrepreneurs. And when I first met him, I said to him, what's the vision? And he said, oh, it's to heal at scale. And I knew that he was on the wrong track. And I could tell that he was on the wrong track because his company had a huge identity crisis when I first met him. And the reason why I knew this was he was off track was because healing at scale is a personal motivator. A personal motivator and a brand vision are not the same thing. And why is that? It's because a personal motivator, which is what gets you out of bed every morning, right, could have multiple applications. If you want to heal at scale, I can build an app. I could run a yoga center. I could open a rehab operation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And it was showing up in how he was running his operation. And it was really interesting with him, which is probably the proverbial equivalent of what a lot of you are probably experiencing in business if you've had challenges, is I went to one of his retreats and I was sharing a room with a woman in her, I would guess maybe mid-60s. And she was an addict and was in a not great state, and was very physically affected by it and, very mentally, of course, kind of not fully with us. And I thought to myself, this is so interesting. Like, in what world would the two of us ever be on the same retreat, let alone sharing a room? We're in very different stages of life. We're mining through very different emotional material. Like, what can we both gain from being in the same space, in the same retreat together? And that's when I realized this whole heal at scale thing was speaking to entrepreneurs who felt like there were internal issues that they needed to unlock in order to better their leadership, but also people in crisis, right? So I said to him, okay, let's run with heal at scale anyway. And let's play this out. So you're going to heal at scale. What then would your mission be? Well, you would need to create a vehicle for healing, right? At the most obvious level, without getting too deep into it. Who is your target audience? Well, people who need healing is a matter of priority. That's one company. So then when I dug a little bit deeper and I said, okay, if you want to go to Canada, your car is really like, it's going straight to Jersey right now. Let's see if we can like align this a little better and get you on track. I dug a little bit deeper and kind of educated him on what a vision really is, which is it's the translation of a personal motivator that in theory is the conduit to getting the outcome that you're hoping to get. A lot of people will also say like, I want to, and my vision is to empower people to do X, Y, Z. And it's an outcome that you cannot control. All you can do is build something that you hope will have that intended outcome. But how people receive what you do is almost none of your business. You could build something that is so helpful to someone for reasons you cannot even possibly identify or delineate because you're not them and you are not in their story, right? And that's what a lot of solopreneurs, startups, honestly, I even see it with businesses as big as medium-sized businesses, is they anchor their entire business builds and brand builds on outcomes they can't control. And then they wonder why there's a lot of swirl and chaos. It's because there's no rack to hang your hat on. You've skipped right over that part. So when I spoke to this, this guy, Ryan, a little bit deeper to try to really understand where this heal at scale was coming from, it was coming from a place of he felt like he got to where he got to. And the only reason he got to where he got to was because of mentorship and coaching and the people who took him under his wing. Because he was a very lost soul and in a gang when he was a teenager and was never supposed to be what he has become. And so I said, great. So what I'm hearing is that it sounds like your vision is to actually create a world where everyone has the coach and mentor they need to fulfill their purpose and unlock their potential. That's a company now. Now we see, if you see the difference, what Heal at Scale is a brand vision could mean a million things. Now I know that the vision is going to have something to do with working towards creating opportunities for people to find the coaches and mentors that they need for whatever it is that they need it for. Well, then what would the mission be? How are you activating against that? Well, it's to build the world's largest mentorship movement. In his case, he was building AI powered by AI. He wants to scale this, right? How do you best do that? Through technology. These days, AI. Now, who's the target audience? Leaders. These same man, one conversation of us sitting at his kitchen table, nobody's getting fired, the house is not coming down. All we've literally done is rewrapped the house with a different siding and given it a different positioning and a different direction. He has a completely different company. I'm going to give you another example. This is a company I worked with. This is a company called 2G. It's a post-production company that services Hollywood studios, and they do all the localization. So when a big movie's coming out, they'll have it localized for, all the countries worldwide with the subtitles and, the proper coding and all the rest. When I first met them, I had them do this exercise. I said, what is your vision? To be visionaries for Hollywood's visions. I'm not even sure what that means. They hired me because they 4 years ago were doing 42 million in revenue and it had dropped down to 7, and they didn't know why, and they needed to fix it fast. So when I took a look at their architecture, because it always comes back to what's the blueprint you're working off of, I was like, well, this got you to where you were, which is great, but it's clearly not working anymore because you probably outgrew that. And now you're moving backwards. This isn't even a point of diminishing return. You're just now in a place of lostness, right? Because of this. Well, what was their mission? To optimize and globalize media and entertainment. Again, I don't even know what that means. Who is their audience? Hollywood studios. So when I did a little bit more digging and translated this properly, again, pointing their car from Jersey to Canada, I realized that their technology actually had a DIY component. And so I was like, if you just need money, why would you just stop with Hollywood studios? So why wouldn't you just make this available to all content creators? Because 99% of content is created in the UGC and Web3 worlds. So now all of a sudden, the vision gets to change to enable every content creator to play on the world stage by democratizing the post-production process. I know what this company does now. Now I know where my little dipper is, or my big dipper, where my North Star is that I'm going. The subsequent mission, every screen, every language, everywhere in the world, from Hollywood to UGC to Web3. Who is now your audience? Oh, that's my playoff. My last slide. So we're good. Hollywood studios, UGC, and Web3 creators. So again, you can see here, same company, no one's getting fired. There's no money lost. You don't need to tear down the whole house. We just rewrapped it with a new vision, a new positioning, and now they're well on their way. So just a couple of things to take away as I wrap here for you. Take away nothing else. No one builds a house without a blueprint. Why do the equivalent for your business if you don't have to? Your brand is the blueprint for your business. Without it, you're just guessing. And number 3, you can either build a who or what brand. And so it's up to you. I suggest choosing wisely. And if you want to chat, have any questions, happy to, be a resource. So here's my email. And thank you for letting me spend the morning with you guys.
Thanks, Jess. And it's great. And I actually worked through my own brand with Jess, and it was actually, I had no idea how many discoveries about myself and what I'm creating in the world were there for me. She is also included as a freebie, 30 minutes with her that, we're going to pop into the chat. It'll be available for you if you get on the replay in the notes. Thank you so much, Jess, for joining us. And we remember brand, a very important component of who we are in the world and what we represent. Thank you.
Thank
All
you so
right.
much. Take care.
Awesome. Take care. Cheers. I'll talk to you soon.